US President Donald Trump says the Democrats are out to get him ahead of the 2020 election. He was responding after a formal impeachment inquiry was announced yesterday by top Democrat Nancy Pelosi. And this followed reports that Mr. Trump pressured Ukraine's leader to help smear his Democratic rival, Joe Biden. And as leverage, the president withheld $400 million in aid. Now, for more on this story, Brendon O'Connor, Associate Professor and Coordinator of the American Studies Program at the University of Sydney, joins us. Brendon, first, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi had previously resisted impeachment calls. So what was different this time?
Well, the obstruction of justice case is probably clearer. It's a simpler issue that there was a whistleblower listening in on a conversation with Donald Trump and the president of Ukraine, where President Trump apparently 8 times pressured the president of Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden and Hunter Biden's son, who was involved in a Ukrainian gas company. So that was at first an abuse of power, maybe not illegal, but irregular, unethical, mafia-style kind of way of doing business. Someone within the intelligence community reported on this conversation, but it was blocked from getting to the US Congress. So that's it in a nutshell, and it's a little simpler than the Mueller inquiry, the Russia investigations, the sacking of James Comey, which is a little muddier. So I think it's a little more the simplicity of the case, but also it's the accumulated effect of there being this, 3 or 4 different possibilities to impeach Trump on, and it's probably just tipped Pelosi over the edge, because there's a lot of younger Democrats who were elected in the last term, midterm elections, who are hungry to see Trump impeached.
So, Brendon, on that point, the Mueller report that you just mentioned there, it didn't end Donald Trump's presidency. So is this scandal more damaging than that report?
Well, I think, as I said, it's the accumulated effect. I mean, there is the sense with Trump that he sees himself as above the law, that he can act with impunity, that he can block investigations, and that it's not going to catch up with him. But obstruction of justice is a really key notion that people should avoid. It's a criminal charge for a good reason, that it stops the law doing its job and being independent. And Trump has very little kind of respect for this. And so over time, I think that eats away at a fundamental element of a judicial independent process. And Trump wants to see himself as above the law. Richard Nixon, when he was interviewed with David Frost after he left the presidency, once said, if a president does something, it's not illegal. And I think Trump tends to follow that kind of mentality. And it's probably, it's necessary that Nancy Pelosi is pointing out that these things are illegal. It doesn't mean they'll end his presidency. Trump could continue on. But I think there is a principle worth standing up for here in terms of obstruction of justice.
So do you think that is more what it's about then, just sort of the principle that they have to, by good conscience, bring this forward?
No, I mean, they're probably hoping that Trump will, do himself a number of injuries along the way, and that there will be a smoking gun showing Trump telling someone within the White House to block this information coming to the US Congress. There's no evidence of that at the moment, but I suppose investigations may lead to some revelation, and I suppose that's what they're hoping for. Like with the Nixon Watergate scandal, once tapes were found and there was a sense and there was enough evidence to show that Nixon had tried to block investigations into it, that there'd been a cover-up. And I suppose will be the case with Trump, looking at how much Trump's hands are all over this attempt to obstruct justice.
Brendon, in regards to that call to Ukraine, Mr. Trump seems unfazed. He says he's going to release the full transcript of that call. He says there will be no evidence of quid pro quo in there. But do you think this will change anything at all? Surely it's not the only quiver in the arrow for the Democrats here. Could it end up backfiring on the Democratic, on their effort to impeach him?
No, I don't think so. The crux is not the conversation with Ukraine. It's the blocking of this whistleblower coming forward. So it's not the original crime, it's the cover-up, as they often say in these scandals. And so the original behaviour was unethical, it was unbecoming of the office of the presidency, it seems, asking a foreign power to investigate one of your rivals and their son's activities. This, as I said before, is the tactics of the mafia attempting to get dirt on their rivals. And the dirt seems quite the opposite of what Trump is suggesting, that the prosecutor who was fired, who was looking into Hunter Biden's, the company that Hunter Biden was on the board of, it was probably replaced by someone who was going to be tougher. So it wasn't a good outcome for Hunter Biden. And this is, I suppose, one thing that gets lost in these scandals with Trump, is that the mud is just flung around by Trump, where the hard facts are often not looked into by the media, or certainly not by Trump. There's a kind of, the spirit of conspiracy is always, I think, floating in the air with Donald Trump.
All right, Brendon, thank you very much for that perspective. We've just been speaking there to Brendon O'Connor, Associate Professor and Coordinator of the American Studies Program at the University of Sydney.